The morning sun barely touched the streets of Millbrook when 12-year-old Danny Martinez woke up shivering behind the old dumpster near Murphy's grocery store. His thin jacket, torn at the sleeves, provided little warmth against the October chill. He had been living on these streets for 3 months now, ever since his grandmother passed away, and social services couldn't locate any other family members. Danny rubbed his eyes and stretched his aching muscles. Sleeping on cardboard wasn't comfortable, but it was better than the cold concrete. He carefully folded the pieces of cardboard that served as his bed and tucked them behind the dumpster, where no one would find them. These small pieces of protection were precious to him. As he walked toward the town center, Danny's stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten anything since yesterday when Mrs. Chen from the bakery had given him a day-old muffin. She was one of the few people who showed him any kindness, though she had to be careful because her boss didn't approve of giving food to homeless people. The town of Millbrook was small, but wealthy. Most residents lived in beautiful houses with perfect lawns and expensive cars in their driveways. They worked in the city nearby and came home to their comfortable lives each evening. To them, Danny was invisible, just another problem they preferred not to see. As Danny walked past the coffee shop, he noticed several people in business suits hurrying to their cars. They stepped around him as if he were a piece of furniture, their eyes looking everywhere except at his face. One woman actually crossed the street when she saw him approaching. Her high heels clicked rapidly on the pavement as she moved away from him. Danny had learned not to ask for help anymore. The rejections hurt too much. Instead, he focused on survival. He knew which restaurants threw away food that was still good. He knew which public restrooms stayed unlocked during the day. He knew which park benches were hidden from view where he could rest without being told to move along. At the town square, Danny sat on the steps of the old church and watched people go about their daily routines. Children his age walked by in clean clothes, carrying school backpacks and chatting with friends. They never looked at him either. Their parents had probably warned them to stay away from homeless people. Father Miguel, the church priest, came out of the building and noticed Danny sitting there. He was a kind man in his 60s with gray hair and gentle eyes. Unlike most people in town, Father Miguel actually saw Danny as a human being. "Good morning, Danny," Father Miguel said softly. "How are you feeling today?" "I'm okay, Father," Danny replied, though they both knew this wasn't entirely true. Father Miguel sat down beside him on the steps. "Have you eaten anything today?" Danny shook his head. He didn't like lying to Father Miguel, who was one of the few adults who treated him with respect and kindness. "Come inside," Father Miguel said. "I have some sandwiches in the kitchen. We can talk while you eat." Danny followed the priest inside the small church. The building was old but well-maintained, with beautiful stained glass windows that cast colorful patterns on the wooden floors. The kitchen was tiny but clean, with a small table and 2 chairs. Father Miguel prepared a sandwich with ham and cheese, along with a glass of milk. Danny ate slowly, savoring every bite. Real food was a luxury he couldn't take for granted. "Danny, I've been thinking," Father Miguel said carefully. "Winter is coming soon and it's going to get much colder. Sleeping outside isn't safe when the temperature drops below freezing." Danny nodded but didn't say anything. He had been worrying about the same thing. Last winter, he had still been living with his grandmother in her small apartment. This would be his first winter on the streets. "I've been making some phone calls," Father Miguel continued. "There might be some options available. Some programs for young people in your situation." "I don't want to go to another foster home," Danny said quickly. "The last one was terrible. They only cared about the money they got from the state. I'd rather stay on the streets." Father Miguel understood Danny's fear. The boy had been through the system before and had bad experiences. Many foster families weren't prepared to deal with children who had been through trauma and loss. "I'm not talking about foster care," Father Miguel said gently. "There are other programs. Group homes run by good people who really care about helping kids like you." Danny finished his sandwich and looked out the window. A group of teenagers was walking by, laughing and joking with each other. They looked so carefree and happy. Danny wondered what it would feel like to be part of a group like that, to have friends and a place to belong. "Can I think about it?" Danny asked. "Of course," Father Miguel replied. "But don't wait too long. Winter will be here before we know it." After leaving the church, Danny walked through the residential area of town. The houses here were even bigger and more expensive than the ones near the town center. He walked slowly, looking at the perfect gardens and shiny cars. Some houses had children's toys in the yards, evidence of happy families living comfortable lives inside. As he turned a corner, Danny noticed a moving truck parked in front of a large blue house. A family was directing the movers, telling them where to put furniture and boxes. There was a man and woman who appeared to be the parents and a girl who looked to be about his age. The girl had curly brown hair and was wearing jeans and a red sweater. She seemed excited about the move, running around and exploring the new house. Danny watched from across the street as she discovered a large oak tree in the backyard, with a tire swing hanging from one of its branches. What Danny didn't notice was that the girl had seen him watching. She looked across the street several times, curious about the boy who stood there alone. Unlike most people in town, she didn't look away or ignore him. Instead, she seemed genuinely interested in who he was and why he was standing there by himself. As the afternoon went on, Danny continued walking around town, looking for any odd jobs or opportunities to earn a little money. But like most days, people avoided eye contact and hurried past him. The invisible boy continued his invisible existence, not knowing that his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. The sun began to set, and Danny made his way back to his spot behind the grocery store. Tomorrow would bring another day of survival, another day of being ignored by a town that preferred not to see him. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, he had a full stomach thanks to Father Miguel's kindness. It was a small comfort in a world that often felt cold and unwelcoming. Emma Rodriguez had been living in Millbrook for exactly 1 week, and she was already noticing things that bothered her. The town was beautiful, with its tree-lined streets and well-maintained parks, but there was something cold about the way people interacted with each other. Or rather, the way they didn't interact. Emma was 13 years old and had moved to Millbrook with her parents because her father got a new job at the regional hospital. Her mother was a social worker who specialized in helping children in difficult situations. Growing up with parents who cared deeply about helping others had shaped Emma's worldview. She couldn't understand how people could simply ignore someone who was obviously in need. That boy she had seen on her first day kept appearing in her thoughts. He was clearly living on the streets, wearing the same torn jacket every day and carrying a worn backpack that seemed to contain everything he owned. What puzzled Emma most was how the adults in town acted as if he didn't exist. Emma's golden retriever, Max, was her constant companion. The 3-year-old dog had been her best friend since she was 10, and he seemed to understand her emotions better than most people. Max was large and friendly, with a gentle nature that made children and adults alike feel comfortable around him. On her second Monday in Millbrook, Emma was walking Max through the town center when she spotted the homeless boy sitting on a bench near the library. He was reading a book that looked old and worn, probably something he had found discarded somewhere. Emma's heart ached seeing him alone while other kids his age were in school. "Come on, Max," Emma whispered to her dog. "Let's go say hello." As they approached the bench, Max's tail started wagging. The dog seemed drawn to the boy as if sensing his loneliness. The boy looked up from his book when he heard them coming, and Emma saw wariness in his dark eyes. He was probably used to being told to move along or being treated as if he were dangerous. "Hi," Emma said simply, sitting down on the other end of the bench. "I'm Emma, and this is Max." Max immediately trotted over to the boy, his tail wagging enthusiastically. Despite his caution around people, the boy's face softened when he saw the friendly dog. "Is it okay if he says hello to you?" Emma asked. The boy nodded and reached out tentatively to pet Max. The dog leaned into his touch, clearly enjoying the attention. For the first time since Emma had seen him, the boy almost smiled. "What's your name?" Emma asked gently. "Danny," he replied quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's a nice name," Emma said. "What are you reading?" Danny held up the book so she could see the cover. It was a collection of short stories by Ray Bradbury, the pages yellowed with age. "I love science fiction," Emma said with genuine enthusiasm. "Is it good?" "Yeah," Danny replied, his voice a little stronger now. "I found it in a box behind the bookstore. Someone threw it away, but it still got all its pages." Emma was impressed that Danny was reading such complex material. Many kids their age struggled with books that were much simpler. "Where do you go to school?" Emma asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Danny looked down at the ground. "I don't go to school anymore. Not since I've been living on the streets." Emma felt anger rising in her chest. Not at Danny, but at the system that had failed him. How could a kid be living on the streets without anyone doing something to help him? "How long have you been homeless?" she asked. "About 3 months," Danny replied. "Since my grandmother died. She was the only family I had left." Emma's heart broke for this boy who seemed so alone in the world. Max must have sensed Danny's sadness because the dog moved closer and rested his head on Danny's lap, offering comfort in the way that only animals can. "Have you eaten today?" Emma asked, noticing how thin Danny looked. Danny shrugged, which Emma took as a no. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the sandwich her mother had packed for her lunch. It was turkey and avocado on whole wheat bread, with a bag of apple slices and a bottle of water. "Here," she said, offering him the food. "I'm not really hungry right now." Danny hesitated. "I can't take your lunch. You'll be hungry later." "I'll be fine," Emma insisted. "My mom always packs too much food anyway. She worries I'm not eating enough." Reluctantly, Danny accepted the food. He ate slowly, as if trying to make it last as long as possible. Emma noticed that he saved half the sandwich and the apple slices, probably to eat later when he got hungry again. "Where do you sleep at night?" Emma asked. Danny pointed vaguely toward the commercial district. "Behind the grocery store. There's a spot where the dumpster blocks the wind." Emma couldn't imagine sleeping outside, especially as the weather was getting colder. The forecast said there might even be frost in the next few weeks. "Isn't it scary sleeping outside alone?" she asked sometimes, Danny admitted. "But you get used to it. And most people leave me alone because they pretend they don't see me." "Well, I see you," Emma said firmly. "And I think what's happening to you is wrong. A kid shouldn't have to live on the streets." Danny looked at her with surprise. Nobody had ever talked about his situation as if it were wrong or unfair. Most people acted as if it were somehow his fault. "There's not much anyone can do about it," Danny said with a shrug. "This is just how things are now." "That's not true," Emma replied with conviction. "There are always things that can be done. My mom is a social worker, and she helps kids all the time. Maybe she could help you too." Danny's expression became guarded again. "I don't want to go back into the foster care system. The last home I was in was terrible. The people didn't care about me at all." Emma understood his reluctance. She had heard her mother talk about cases where children weren't treated well in foster care. But she also knew there were good people out there who genuinely wanted to help. "What if there were other options?" Emma asked. "What if we could find someone who really cared and would treat you like family?" "People like that don't take in street kids," Danny said with bitter wisdom beyond his years. "You'd be surprised," Emma replied. "Good people exist even in places like this where everyone seems to mind their own business." Max had fallen asleep with his head still resting on Danny's lap. The boy was gently stroking the dog's golden fur, and Emma could see how much comfort the animal's presence brought him. "Max really likes you," Emma observed. "He's usually friendly, but he doesn't usually get this attached to someone so quickly." "I like him too," Danny said softly. "I haven't been around any pets since I've been on the streets. I forgot how nice it is to have something warm and alive that's happy to see you." Emma made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. "Would you like to meet Max and me here again tomorrow? Same time?" Danny looked at her with surprise and hope. "You'd want to do that?" "Of course," Emma said. "Everyone needs a friend, and I think Max and I would like to be your friends if you'll let us." For the first time since Emma had seen him, Danny smiled a real, genuine smile. "I'd like that a lot." As Emma and Max prepared to leave, she turned back to Danny. "Is there anything else you need? Food, clothes, anything?" Danny shook his head. "You've already done more for me than anyone has in months. Just having someone talk to me like I'm a real person means everything." Emma felt tears stinging her eyes as she and Max walked away. She kept looking back at Danny, who was watching them go with an expression of hope mixed with disbelief. She had never encountered such loneliness in someone her own age, and she was determined to do something about it. That night, Emma lay in her comfortable bed in her warm house, thinking about Danny sleeping behind a dumpster. She knew she couldn't just be his friend and leave it at that. Something bigger needed to happen, and she was going to figure out what that something was. Emma spent the entire evening thinking about her conversation with Danny. She couldn't concentrate on her homework, or even her favorite television show. The image of a 12-year-old boy sleeping behind a dumpster in the cold kept filling her mind. She had grown up in a family where helping others wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. Her parents had taught her that when you see someone in need, You don't look the other way. After dinner, Emma approached her parents in the living room. Her father, Dr. Carlos Rodriguez, was reading medical journals while her mother, Maria Rodriguez, was reviewing case files from her job at the Department of Children and Family Services. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," Emma said. Sitting down across from them, both parents looked up, immediately giving her their full attention. They had always encouraged Emma to come to them with problems or concerns, no matter how big or small. "There's a boy in town who's homeless," Emma began. "He's only 12 years old and he's been living on the streets for 3 months. I met him today and I don't understand how everyone just ignores him." Maria set down her files and leaned forward. Her professional instincts had immediately kicked in. "Tell me everything you know about this situation." Emma described her encounter with Danny, including details about his grandmother's death, his fear of foster care, and the way the townspeople treated him as if he were invisible. Her parents listened without interrupting, their expressions growing more concerned with each detail. "His name is Danny Martinez," Emma concluded. "He's smart and polite, and he's reading science fiction books he finds in the trash. He doesn't deserve to be living like this." Dr. Rodriguez shook his head in disbelief. "A child has been living on our streets for 3 months, and this is the first we're hearing about it?" "Apparently, most people prefer to pretend he doesn't exist," Emma replied with obvious frustration. Maria was already making notes on a pad of paper. "Emma, this boy needs immediate help. If he's been living on the streets since summer, he's probably not enrolled in school. He may not be getting proper medical care, and winter is coming. This is a crisis situation. Can you help him, Mom?" Emma asked hopefully. "I can try," Maria replied carefully. "But the system is complicated, especially when a child is actively avoiding social services. If he's had bad experiences with foster care, he might run away if he thinks we're trying to place him in the system again." Emma's father had an idea. "What if we approach this differently? Instead of going through official channels immediately, what if we try to build trust with him first? Show him that not all adults will let him down." "What do you mean?" Emma asked. "Well," Dr. Rodriguez continued, "winter is coming and this boy needs warm clothes, regular meals, and a safe place to sleep. What if we start by meeting those basic needs while we figure out a longer-term solution?" Maria nodded thoughtfully. "That could work, but we'd need to be careful. We can't just take in a child without going through proper procedures eventually, but we could provide support while we work on finding the right permanent solution." Emma felt hope rising in her chest. "So you'll help him?" "Of course we'll help him," Maria said firmly. "No child should be living on the streets, especially not in a community that has the resources to help." The next morning, Emma could barely contain her excitement as she and Max made their way to meet Danny at the library. She had a backpack full of supplies her mother had helped her gather: sandwiches, fruit, a thermos of hot soup, warm socks, a heavy sweatshirt, and a waterproof jacket. Danny was sitting in the same spot reading the same worn book. When he saw Emma and Max approaching, his face lit up with genuine happiness. Emma realized that her daily visit might be the only positive interaction he had with another person. "Good morning, Danny," Emma said, sitting down beside him. Max immediately went to Danny and began his enthusiastic greeting, tail wagging and tongue licking Danny's hand. "Good morning," Danny replied, his voice much stronger than it had been the day before. "I wasn't sure if you'd really come back." "I told you I would," Emma said simply. "When I make a promise, I keep it." She opened her backpack and began pulling out the supplies. Danny's eyes widened as he saw the quantity and quality of the food and clothing. "Emma, this is too much," Danny protested. "I can't accept all this." "Yes, you can," Emma replied firmly. "My parents helped me put this together. They want to help you too." Danny looked surprised and a little worried. "You told your parents about me?" "Of course I did," Emma said. "Danny, you're living on the streets." "That's not something I could keep secret from my parents, and it's not something they would ignore." Emma could see the conflict in Danny's expression. He clearly needed and wanted the help, but years of disappointment and betrayal had made him cautious about trusting adults. "My mom is a social worker," Emma explained gently. "She helps kids who are in difficult situations. She's really good at her job, and she genuinely cares about children. She's not like the people who let you down before." "What does she want from me?" Danny asked cautiously. "She wants to make sure you're safe and healthy," Emma replied. She wants to help you find a permanent solution so you don't have to sleep outside when it gets cold. Danny was quiet for a long moment, stroking Max's fur while he thought. Finally, he spoke. The last social worker I dealt with promised me things would get better. She placed me with a family who only cared about the money they got from the state. They had 4 other foster kids, and we were just paychecks to them. When I complained about how they treated us, the social worker said I was being difficult and ungrateful. Emma felt anger on Danny's behalf, but she tried to keep her voice calm and reassuring. My mom isn't like that social worker. She's been helping kids for 15 years, and she's never given up on anyone. She wants to meet you, but only if you're comfortable with it. What if I meet her and then decide I don't want her help? Danny asked. Then that's your choice, Emma replied honestly. Nobody is going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. But Danny, winter is coming. The temperatures at night are already dropping into the 30s. It's going to get dangerous to sleep outside. Danny knew Emma was right. He had been dreading the arrival of winter, knowing that his makeshift shelter behind the grocery store wouldn't provide enough protection from snow and freezing temperatures. Where would I meet your mom? Danny asked slowly. Emma's heart jumped with hope. Anywhere you feel comfortable. At the library, at the park, at our house if you want. Whatever feels safest to you. Danny thought for another moment, then made a decision that required tremendous courage. Could I meet her here tomorrow? At the same time? Absolutely, Emma said, trying not to show how excited she was. She'll come with me and Max for our regular visit. As Danny ate the lunch Emma had brought, she told him more about her parents. She explained how her father worked at the hospital helping sick people get better, and how her mother specialized in finding good homes for children who needed them. She's helped kids who were in situations just like yours, Emma said. Some of them had been through bad foster homes too. She never gives up until she finds the right solution for each child. What kinds of solutions? Danny asked curiously. Sometimes she finds relatives that the system missed, Emma explained. Sometimes she finds really good foster families who understand what kids have been through. Sometimes she helps kids get into group homes run by people who really care. And sometimes she finds families who want to adopt older kids. Danny had never heard of anyone wanting to adopt a 12-year-old, especially one who had been living on the streets. Most people wanted babies or very young children. Do people really adopt kids our age? He asked skeptically. More often than you'd think, Emma replied. My mom says there are families out there who specifically want to help older kids because they understand that's when children need the most support. As their visit came to an end, Emma left Danny with enough food for dinner and breakfast, plus the warm clothes her mother had selected. She also gave him her phone number written on a piece of paper. If you need anything before tomorrow or if you get scared and want to talk, call me, she said. My parents said it's okay for you to call anytime, day or night. Danny looked at the phone number as if it were a lifeline. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had given him a way to contact them when he needed help. Emma, Danny said as she and Max prepared to leave. Why are you doing this? Why do you care what happens to me? Emma turned back to him with a serious expression. Because you matter, Danny. You're a person with value and potential, and you deserve to have a good life. Everyone deserves that, but especially kids. No child should have to survive on their own. That night, Danny lay on his cardboard bed wearing the warm sweatshirt Emma had given him. For the first time in months, he wasn't shivering. He held the piece of paper with Emma's phone number in his hand, and for the first time since his grandmother died, he felt like he might not be completely alone in the world. Tomorrow would bring his first conversation with an adult in months, someone who might be able to change his life forever. Danny fell asleep that night with something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Maria Rodriguez had spent most of the previous evening preparing for her meeting with Danny. She had reviewed similar cases from her 15 years as a social worker, thinking about approaches that had worked well with children who had been traumatized by the system. She understood that Danny's reluctance to trust adults was completely rational, given his experiences. Emma was nervous as she and her mother walked Max to the library the next morning. She desperately wanted this meeting to go well, knowing that it might be Danny's only chance at getting the help he needed. If he ran away or decided not to trust her mother, Emma wasn't sure what other options existed for him. Mom, what if he doesn't like you? Emma asked as they approached the library. Then we'll respect his feelings and figure out another way to help, Maria replied calmly. Emma, the most important thing right now is that Danny feels safe and in control of the situation. We're not going to push him or pressure him into anything. Danny was waiting on the bench wearing the sweatshirt Emma had given him and looking cleaner than usual. Emma suspected he had found a way to wash up somewhere, probably wanting to make a good impression. "Danny, this is my mom, Maria," Emma said gently as they approached. "Mom, this is Danny." Maria sat down carefully on the bench, leaving plenty of space so Danny wouldn't feel crowded. Max immediately trotted over to Danny, providing a comforting presence during what was surely a stressful moment. "It's very nice to meet you, Danny," Maria said warmly. "Emma has told me a lot about you. She says you're a reader." Danny nodded shyly, holding up the Ray Bradbury book. "I like science fiction. This one has really good short stories." "I love Ray Bradbury," Maria said with genuine enthusiasm. "Have you read The Martian Chronicles?" "It's one of my favorites," Danny shook his head. "I've never heard of that one." "I have a copy at home," Maria said. "If you'd like to borrow it, I'd be happy to lend it to you." Emma watched the interaction carefully, pleased to see that her mother was treating Danny like any other kid rather than speaking to him in the patronizing way many adults used with homeless people. "Emma tells me, you've been on your own for several months," Maria said gently. "That must be incredibly difficult and scary." "It's not so bad," Danny replied automatically, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Danny, it's okay to admit that living on the streets is hard," Maria said softly. "You don't have to be strong and brave every single moment. What you've been doing, surviving on your own at 12 years old, that takes more courage than most adults will ever need." Something in Maria's tone seemed to reach Danny. His carefully maintained composure cracked slightly, and Emma could see tears forming in his eyes. "Sometimes it is really hard," Danny admitted quietly, "especially at night when it's cold and I hear strange noises, and when people look at me like I'm not human. I imagine it's terrifying sometimes," Maria said with compassion. "No child should have to feel that kind of fear and loneliness." Emma pulled a tissue from her backpack and handed it to Danny, who wiped his eyes quickly. "Emma said you might be able to help me find somewhere safe to live," Danny said hesitantly. "But I don't want to go back to foster care. The last family was awful." Maria nodded, understanding. "Can you tell me what happened with that family?" "You don't have to share details if it's too painful, but it would help me understand what kind of situation to avoid." Danny took a deep breath and began to describe his experience with the Hendersons, the foster family where he had lived for 6 months before running away. They had 5 foster children in a small house, providing minimal food and clothing, while collecting substantial payments from the state. The children were expected to do all the housework, while the adults watched television and complained about how difficult their lives were. "They never asked how I was feeling or if I needed anything," Danny explained. "When I told my social worker that we weren't getting enough food and that one of the other kids was being hit, she said I was making trouble and being ungrateful." Maria's expression darkened as she listened to Danny's story. She had encountered social workers like that before. People who were burned out and had stopped seeing the children in their caseload as real people with real needs. "Danny, what happened to you was wrong," Maria said firmly. "You weren't being ungrateful or making trouble. You were advocating for yourself and the other children, which showed tremendous maturity and courage." Danny looked surprised. No adult had ever told him that his complaints about the Hendersons were justified. "The social worker made me feel like it was my fault that I wasn't happy there," Danny said. "She said I had unrealistic expectations and that I should be grateful for any home at all." "That social worker failed you completely," Maria replied with controlled anger. "Her job was to protect you and make sure you were in a good placement. Instead, she made you feel like your needs didn't matter." Emma watched her mother with admiration. She had never seen Maria so passionate about a case, though she tried to keep her emotions in check for Danny's sake. "Are all foster families like the Hendersons?" Danny asked. "Absolutely not," Maria replied emphatically. "There are many wonderful foster families who provide loving, supportive homes for children. The problem is that the system doesn't always do a good job of matching children with the right families, and some social workers don't take the time to properly investigate complaints." Maria paused and looked directly at Danny. "But foster care isn't the only option. There are other possibilities we could explore if you're willing to let me help." "What other possibilities?" Danny asked with curiosity. "Well, first we need to do some research into your family background," Maria explained. "Sometimes there are relatives that the system missed, people who weren't contacted when your grandmother died. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends who were like family to your grandmother. Danny shook his head. My grandmother always said we didn't have any other family. Sometimes people lose touch over the years, Maria said gently. Or sometimes elderly people forget about distant relatives. It's worth investigating thoroughly. What if there really isn't any family? Danny asked. Then we look at other options, Maria replied. There are some excellent group homes run by people who understand what children like you have been through. These aren't like foster homes where you're placed with a random family. They're specifically designed for kids who need extra support and understanding. Emma could see that Danny was becoming more interested and less guarded as her mother talked. What are group homes like? Danny asked. The good ones are like having a house full of big brothers and sisters with adults who are specially trained to help kids heal from trauma, Maria explained. You'd have your own room, regular meals, help with school, counseling if you wanted, and most importantly, adults who are committed to helping you succeed. Danny was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this information. The idea of having his own room and regular meals was almost too good to imagine. There's another possibility, too. Maria continued carefully. There are families who specifically want to adopt older children. These are people who understand that kids your age need different kinds of support than babies or toddlers. People really adopt 12-year-olds? Danny asked skeptically. More often than you might think, Maria replied. These families know that older children have been through difficult experiences, and they're prepared to provide the patience and understanding that's needed. Emma spoke up for the first time during their conversation. Danny, whatever happens, you don't have to decide anything today. Mom just wants you to know that you have options. Maria nodded. Emma's absolutely right. The most important thing right now is making sure you're safe and healthy while we explore these possibilities. Winter is coming and sleeping outside is going to become dangerous. Where would I stay while you're looking into these options? Danny asked. There are emergency shelters for children, Maria said. But I know those can feel institutional and scary. If you're comfortable with it, there might be other temporary arrangements we could make. Emma held her breath, hoping her mother was about to suggest what Emma thought she was going to suggest. My husband and I have been talking, Maria continued carefully. If you're willing and if we can get emergency temporary custody approval, you could stay with our family while we work on finding a permanent solution. Danny's eyes widened with surprise and hope. You would let me stay in your house? If that's what you want, Maria replied. We have a guest room that would be yours, and Emma and Max would love having you around. But Danny, this would be temporary while we work on finding the right permanent home for you. Danny looked overwhelmed by the offer. After months of sleeping behind dumpsters and being ignored by everyone around him, the idea of having a real room in a real house seemed like an impossible dream. Why would you do that for me? Danny asked quietly. You don't even know me. Because every child deserves safety and kindness, Maria replied simply. And because Emma cares about you, which tells me you're someone worth caring about. Emma has excellent judgment about people. Emma felt proud hearing her mother's words. She had been worried that her parents might think she was being naive or too trusting, but instead they were supporting her instincts about Danny. What would I have to do if I stayed with you? Emma could barely sleep that night, wondering what Danny would decide. She had seen the hope in his eyes when her mother offered him a place to stay, but she had also seen the fear. After everything Danny had been through, trusting another family had to feel like an enormous leap of faith. The next morning, Emma arrived at the library earlier than usual, bringing Max and an extra-large breakfast she had convinced her father to help her prepare. Dr. Rodriguez had been just as moved by Danny's story as his wife had been, and he was eager to help in any way he could. Danny was already waiting on the bench, and Emma could tell immediately that something had changed. He looked nervous but determined, and he was sitting straighter than usual. Good morning, Danny, Emma said, trying to keep her voice calm despite her excitement. Good morning, Emma, Danny replied. I've been thinking about what your mom said yesterday. Emma's heart started beating faster, but she tried not to show how anxious she was to hear his decision. I want to accept your family's offer, Danny said quietly. If you're sure it's okay with your parents. Emma felt like shouting with joy, but she controlled herself and simply smiled warmly. It's definitely okay with them. My mom is already working on the paperwork to make it official. Danny looked relieved, but still nervous. What happens now? Mom said she needs to meet with you one more time to go over the details and fill out some forms. Emma explained. Then she has to submit everything to the court for emergency temporary custody approval. It usually takes a day or two. Where will I stay while we're waiting for approval? Danny asked. Emma had been wondering the same thing. Technically, Danny couldn't stay with them until the legal paperwork was complete, but the weather forecast called for near-freezing temperatures that night. Mom thought about that too, Emma said. She found an emergency shelter that's run by people she trusts. It's only for a few nights, and she promised it's not like the bad foster home you were in. Danny nodded, though Emma could see he was apprehensive about going to any kind of institutional facility. What's the shelter like? Danny asked. It's called Haven House, and it's specifically for kids who are between placements, Emma explained. Mom says the people who run it understand that kids in your situation need extra patience and kindness. And she's going to visit you every day while we wait for the paperwork. Emma pulled out her phone and called her mother, who had been waiting to hear from them. Maria was at the library within 20 minutes, carrying a folder full of paperwork and wearing the biggest smile Emma had seen from her in weeks. Danny, I'm so glad you decided to let us help, Maria said warmly as she sat down beside him. I promise we're going to do everything we can to make this work. Over the next hour, Maria explained exactly what would happen over the next few days. Danny would stay at Haven House for 2 nights while she processed the emergency custody paperwork. If everything went smoothly, he could move in with the Rodriguez family by Thursday. What if the court says no? Danny asked with worry. They won't, Maria replied confidently. I've been doing this for 15 years and I know how to present these cases. You're a child in immediate danger with nowhere else to go, and we're a licensed foster family offering temporary emergency care. The court will approve it. Maria had brought clothes for Danny, including a warm coat that had belonged to Emma's older cousin. She had also brought a small suitcase so Danny could pack his few belongings with dignity, rather than carrying them in a plastic bag. After you're settled with us, we'll start working on the long-term plan, Maria explained. The first step is getting you enrolled in school and making sure you're healthy. Then we'll begin researching your family background and exploring permanent placement options. Danny listened carefully to everything Maria told him, asking thoughtful questions and taking notes on a piece of paper. Emma was impressed by how mature and responsible he was being about such a major life change. Is there anything specific you're worried about? Maria asked gently. I'm worried about being a burden, Danny admitted. I've never lived with a real family and I don't know if I'll know how to act or what to do. Danny, you're not going to be a burden, Emma said firmly. You're going to be part of our family temporarily, and that means we all take care of each other. Maria nodded in agreement. Every family has an adjustment period when someone new joins, even temporarily. We'll figure things out together, and if you're confused about anything, all you have to do is ask. That afternoon, Maria drove Danny to Haven House while Emma and Max waited in the car. The building was smaller and more homelike than Emma had expected, with a garden in front and children's artwork displayed in the windows. Mrs. Patterson, the director of Haven House, greeted Danny warmly and showed him to a small but comfortable room with a real bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the garden. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and safe, and Danny would have privacy. You'll only be here for a couple of nights, Mrs. Patterson explained kindly. Ms. Rodriguez has explained your situation, and we're going to take very good care of you while we wait for the paperwork to go through. Emma could see that Danny was nervous about being left at the shelter, even though it seemed like a nice place. This was probably the first time in months that he had slept anywhere other than behind the grocery store. I'll see you tomorrow, Emma promised as they prepared to leave. And Mom will be here in the morning to check on you and update you about the paperwork. Emma, Danny said quietly, thank you for not giving up on me. Emma felt tears starting to form in her eyes. I told you before, Danny, you matter. We weren't going to just forget about you. That evening, the Rodriguez family had a serious conversation about the changes that were about to happen in their household. Dr. Rodriguez had already contacted the middle school about enrolling Danny, and he had scheduled a medical appointment to make sure Danny was healthy. This is going to be an adjustment for all of us, Maria reminded Emma. Danny has been through trauma, and he's going to need time to feel comfortable and safe. There might be difficult moments while he learns to trust us. I understand, Emma replied. I just want him to be safe and happy. That's what we all want, Dr. Rodriguez said. But Emma, you need to remember that you're not responsible for fixing Danny's problems. We're the adults, and it's our job to help him heal. Your job is just to be his friend. Emma nodded, though she still felt a strong sense of responsibility for Danny's well-being. She was the one who had approached him first, and she felt invested in making sure this placement worked out. Meanwhile, at Haven House, Danny was experiencing his first night indoors in months. The bed felt strange after sleeping on cardboard for so long, and the silence was unfamiliar after months of street noises. But he was warm and safe, and for the first time since his grandmother died, he wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Mrs. Patterson had given him new pajamas and a toothbrush, simple things that most kids took for granted but felt like luxuries to Danny. She had also left a plate of homemade cookies and a glass of milk on his bedside table, with a note saying that he was welcome to ask for anything he needed. As Danny fell asleep in a real bed for the first time in months, he thought about how much his life had changed since Emma and Max had approached him on that bench. One girl and her dog had seen him when everyone else chose to look away, and now everything was different. He still didn't know what his permanent future would look like, but for the first time since his grandmother's death, he felt like he might actually have a future worth looking forward to. Tomorrow would bring him one step closer to living with a family who had chosen to care about him, and that thought filled him with hope he hadn't felt in a very long time. The emergency custody paperwork was approved faster than anyone expected. Maria received the call from the courthouse on Wednesday afternoon, just one day after submitting Danny's case. The judge had reviewed the situation and immediately granted temporary custody to the Rodriguez family, recognizing the urgency of getting a homeless child into safe housing before winter weather arrived. Emma was at school when her mother called with the news, but Maria had already arranged to pick up Danny from Haven House that afternoon. When Emma got home, she found Danny sitting nervously in their living room, still wearing the clothes Maria had brought him but looking overwhelmed by his new surroundings. Max had apparently already claimed Danny as his new best friend. The golden retriever was lying at Danny's feet, occasionally looking up at him with adoring eyes. Danny was absently stroking Max's fur, which seemed to be helping him stay calm in this unfamiliar environment. "Welcome home, Danny," Emma said gently, sitting down across from him. "Thank you," Danny replied quietly. "Your house is really nice." Emma looked around their living room, trying to see it through Danny's eyes. After months of living behind a dumpster, even their modest middle-class home probably seemed incredibly luxurious. "Mom showed you your room?" Emma asked. Danny nodded. "It's bigger than any room I've ever had to myself, and it has a real closet for clothes." Emma realized that Danny had probably never lived anywhere with enough space for each person to have their own room. The simplest things that she took for granted were exciting new experiences for him. Dr. Rodriguez came home from the hospital earlier than usual, eager to welcome Danny to their family. He found Danny and Emma sitting on the floor playing with Max, both of them laughing as the dog performed his repertoire of tricks. "You must be Danny," Dr. Rodriguez said warmly, extending his hand for a handshake. "I'm Carlos, Emma's dad. We're really glad you're here." Danny stood up politely to shake hands, and Emma could see that he was nervous about making a good impression on her father. "Thank you for letting me stay here." "Dr. Rodriguez," Danny said formally. "Please, call me Carlos," Dr. Rodriguez replied with a smile. "And you don't need to thank us. We're happy to have you as part of our family." That evening, the Rodriguez family had their first dinner together with Danny. Maria had made his favorite meal based on what Emma had learned about his preferences: spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread, and a green salad. Danny ate slowly as if he were still getting used to having unlimited food available. "Danny, tomorrow we need to get you enrolled in school," Maria said gently. "I know you've been out for several months, but the teachers at the middle school are prepared to help you catch up." Danny looked nervous about starting school. "What if the other kids ask questions about where I've been? What if they find out I was homeless?" "You don't have to tell anyone anything you don't want to share," Emma said supportively. "If anyone asks, you can just say you moved here from another town." Dr. Rodriguez had another suggestion. "Danny, there's nothing shameful about what you've been through. You survived a really difficult situation, and that shows incredible strength. But Emma's right that you get to decide what to share and with whom." After dinner, Emma showed Danny around the house more thoroughly, pointing out where everything was and explaining the family's routines. Danny seemed particularly amazed by the bathroom, which had hot water, clean towels, and all the toiletries a person could need. "You can take a shower whenever you want," Emma explained. And all the shampoo and soap in there is for everyone to use. Danny nodded. Though Emma could tell he was still adjusting to the idea that he had unlimited access to basic necessities like hot water and soap. When it was time for bed, Maria tucked Danny into his new room just as she did with Emma every night. The guest room had been transformed into a space suitable for a 12-year-old boy, with new bedding, some books on the nightstand, and a small desk where Danny could do homework. "Danny, if you need anything during the night, don't hesitate to come find one of us," Maria said gently. "Sometimes it takes a while to feel comfortable in a new place, and that's completely normal." "Thank you," Danny said softly. "I can't believe this is real." "It's real," Maria assured him. "You're safe now, and you're going to stay safe. Sweet dreams." After his first night in the Rodriguez house, Danny woke up confused for a moment about where he was. The bed was so comfortable, and the room so quiet that it took him a few seconds to remember that he wasn't behind the grocery store anymore. When he looked out the window, he saw Emma's backyard with its big oak tree and the tire swing, and he felt a surge of happiness that surprised him. The smell of bacon cooking downstairs drew Danny to the kitchen, where he found Dr. Rodriguez making breakfast before leaving for work at the hospital. "Good morning, Danny," Carlos said cheerfully. "How did you sleep?" "Really well," Danny replied honestly. "I forgot how nice it feels to sleep in a real bed." Carlos served Danny a plate of scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast, along with a glass of orange juice. It was more food than Danny usually ate in an entire day when he was living on the streets. "After school today, Mom is going to take you shopping for some clothes and school supplies," Carlos explained. "And this weekend we thought we might take you to get a library card so you can check out as many books as you want." Danny's eyes lit up at the mention of the library. Access to unlimited books was one of the things he had missed most about living indoors. Emma came downstairs ready for school, and Danny noticed that she had packed an extra lunch. "This is for you," Emma said, handing Danny the lunch bag. "Mom thought you might be nervous about eating in the cafeteria on your first day, so you can eat with me and my friends if you want." Danny felt grateful for Emma's thoughtfulness. The idea of navigating a school cafeteria full of kids who all knew each other was intimidating. The middle school principal, Mrs. Johnson, had been briefed by Maria about Danny's situation and was prepared to help him transition smoothly. She gave Danny a tour of the building and introduced him to his teachers, all of whom had been instructed to be patient and supportive as he caught up on missed coursework. Danny's first class was English, and he was pleasantly surprised to discover that they were reading The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. He had found a copy of that book in a trash bin weeks earlier and had already read it twice. When the teacher, Mr. Williams, asked for volunteers to discuss the themes in the book, Danny hesitantly raised his hand. "The book is about kids who don't fit in with society," Danny said thoughtfully. "But it shows that even when people think you're worthless, you can still have honor and loyalty and be a good person." Mr. Williams was impressed by Danny's insight, and several other students nodded in agreement with his analysis. Danny felt a small surge of confidence, realizing that his months of reading discarded books had actually prepared him well for academic discussions. At lunch, Emma introduced Danny to her group of friends, Sarah, Michael, and Jake. They were curious about the new student but not pushy about asking personal questions. Emma had clearly briefed them on being welcoming without being nosy. "Do you like sports?" Michael asked. "We usually play basketball after school if you want to join us." Danny hadn't played any sports in months, but the idea of having something normal to do with kids his own age sounded wonderful. "I'm not very good at basketball," Danny admitted, "but I'd like to try." "None of us are very good either," Sarah said with a laugh. "That's what makes it fun." By the end of his first day at school, Danny felt more hopeful about fitting in than he had expected. The teachers were kind and patient, the other students seemed friendly, and he was already looking forward to tomorrow's English class discussion. When Maria picked him up after school, Danny was smiling genuinely for the first time since she had met him. "How was your first day?" Maria asked as they drove to the store to buy clothes and school supplies. "It was good," Danny said, and he actually meant it. "Really good. I think I'm going to like it here." That evening, as the Rodriguez family sat around the dinner table sharing stories about their day, Danny felt something he hadn't experienced in months. He felt like he belonged somewhere. It was just temporary, he reminded himself. But for now, he was part of a family that cared about him, and for the first time since his grandmother died, that felt like enough. 3 months had passed since Danny moved in with the Rodriguez family, and the transformation in his life was remarkable. He had gained weight, his grades were excellent, and he had developed genuine friendships with Emma's circle of friends. Most importantly, he had begun to trust that adults could be reliable and caring. During those 3 months, Maria had been working tirelessly on Danny's case. She had spent countless hours researching his family background, making phone calls and following up on every possible lead. Her persistence had finally paid off in a way that none of them had expected. "Danny, I need to talk with you about something important," Maria said one evening after dinner. "I've found someone from your family." Danny looked up from his homework with surprise and concern. After months of feeling settled and secure, the idea of another major change was frightening. "Who did you find?" Danny asked cautiously. "Your grandmother had a younger sister named Elena who lives in Phoenix, Arizona," Maria explained gently. "Your grandmother lost touch with her many years ago after a family disagreement. But Elena has been looking for you ever since she heard about your grandmother's death." Danny stared at Maria in disbelief. "I have an aunt. My grandmother never mentioned her." "Sometimes families lose touch over silly arguments that become bigger than they should," Maria said. "Elena told me that she and your grandmother stopped speaking over 20 years ago because of a disagreement about your grandfather's funeral arrangements. They were both too stubborn to apologize, and eventually they lost contact completely." Emma, who had been listening from the doorway, came into the room and sat beside Danny. She could see that he was overwhelmed by this news. "What does this mean for me?" Danny asked quietly. "It means you have family who wants you," Maria replied with a smile. "Elena is married to a man named Robert, and they have 2 children who are a little older than you. Elena works as a teacher, and Robert is a mechanic who owns his own shop. They've been hoping to find you for months." Danny felt a mixture of excitement and terror. After everything he had been through, the idea of having real family seemed too good to be true. "Do they know about everything that happened to me?" "About me being homeless?" Danny asked. "Elena knows everything," Maria assured him. "I told her about your experiences with foster care and living on the streets. She was heartbroken that you went through all of that when you had family, who would have taken you in immediately." "Why didn't the social workers find her when my grandmother died?" Danny wanted to know. Maria's expression darkened slightly. "Because the social worker assigned to your case didn't do a thorough investigation. Elena had moved several times over the years and had gotten married, so her name changed. A competent social worker would have found her, but unfortunately you didn't get a competent social worker." Emma could see that Danny was struggling with conflicting emotions. He was happy to learn he had family, but he was also afraid of leaving the Rodriguez family who had become his safe haven. "Danny, you don't have to make any decisions right away," Maria said gently. "Elena is coming to visit next week so you can meet each other. If you both feel comfortable with it, she'd like you to come live with her family in Phoenix." "What if I like her but I want to stay here?" Danny asked quietly. Emma felt her heart break a little, knowing that Danny was torn between his newfound security with her family and the opportunity to be with his real family. "Danny, we've always known this was temporary," Maria said softly. "The goal was always to find you a permanent home where you'd be loved and cared for. Elena is your family, and from everything I've learned about her, she's going to provide exactly the kind of home you deserve." Dr. Rodriguez, who had been listening from the kitchen, joined the conversation. "Danny, no matter what happens, you'll always be part of our family too. Distance doesn't change the fact that we care about you." Over the next week, Danny was nervous and excited about meeting his aunt. Emma helped him prepare by practicing what he might say and reassuring him that everything would work out for the best, even though she was heartbroken about the possibility of losing her friend. When Elena Martinez Garcia arrived at the airport, Danny knew immediately that she was related to him. She had the same dark eyes and warm smile as his grandmother, and when she saw Danny, she started crying tears of joy. "You look so much like your grandmother when she was young," Elena said, pulling Danny into a hug. "I've been dreaming about this moment for months." Elena spent a week in Millbrook getting to know Danny and learning about his experiences with the Rodriguez family. She was impressed by how well Danny had adjusted and how much he had grown during his time with them. "Maria, I can't thank you enough for what you've done for Danny," Elena said during one of their conversations. You saved his life, and you gave him back his confidence and his hope. Elena also spent time with Danny alone, sharing stories about his grandmother as a young woman and telling him about his cousins Miguel and Sofia, who were 14 and 16 years old. They're so excited to meet you, Elena told Danny. Miguel loves science fiction just like you do, and Sofia is an artist who can't wait to show you her paintings. By the end of the week, both Danny and Elena felt certain that they wanted to be a family. Danny was sad about leaving the Rodriguez family, but he was excited about having blood relatives who genuinely wanted him. The transition was planned carefully to make it as smooth as possible for Danny. He would finish the school year in Millbrook, then move to Phoenix over the summer. This would give him time to say goodbye to his friends and adjust emotionally to the idea of moving. Emma was devastated about losing Danny, but she was also genuinely happy that he had found his real family. She had seen how much it meant to him to discover that he wasn't completely alone in the world. "Promise me you'll keep in touch," Emma said as they sat under the oak tree in her backyard with Max. "I promise," Danny replied. "Emma, you changed my life. If you hadn't talked to me that day at the library, I probably wouldn't have survived the winter." "You would have found a way," Emma said confidently. "You're the strongest person I know." As Danny's departure date approached, the Rodriguez family threw him a going-away party with all his school friends. Sarah, Michael, and Jake had become close friends of Danny's, and they were all sad to see him leave, but excited about his opportunity to live with family. Father Miguel came to the party and presented Danny with a gift, a brand new copy of The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury, the book Maria had mentioned during their first meeting. "For your new beginning," Father Miguel said with a smile, "and to remember that you always have friends here in Millbrook." On the day Danny left for Phoenix, the entire Rodriguez family drove him to the airport. Max seemed to understand that something important was happening and stayed close to Danny throughout the morning. "Thank you for everything," Danny said to Carlos and Maria as they prepared to say goodbye. "You gave me back my life when I thought it was over." "You gave us something too, Danny," Maria replied. "You reminded us why we do this work, and you showed us what courage really looks like." Emma's goodbye was the hardest. She and Danny had become like siblings during his time with her family, and parting felt like losing a piece of herself. "I'll visit you in Phoenix," Emma promised. "And you have to promise to visit us here." "I promise," Danny said, hugging her tightly. "And Emma, thank you for seeing me when everyone else was looking the other way." As Danny's plane took off for Phoenix, he looked down at the town of Millbrook and thought about how much his life had changed. 6 months earlier, he had been a homeless boy that everyone ignored. Now he was on his way to live with family who loved him, and he had friends who would always be part of his life. In Phoenix, Elena and her family were waiting at the airport with a banner that read, "Welcome home, Danny." His cousins Miguel and Sofia were bouncing with excitement, and his uncle Robert was grinning from ear to ear. As Danny walked toward his new family, he thought about Emma and Max and all the kindness that had led to this moment. One brave girl and her dog had refused to ignore him, and that simple act of compassion had changed everything. Danny Martinez was no longer homeless, no longer invisible, and no longer alone. He was a boy with a family, a future, and friends who would love him forever. And it all started because someone chose to see him when everyone else chose to look away. Years later, Danny would become a social worker himself, inspired by Maria's example, and dedicated to helping children who felt as lost and invisible as he once had. Emma would go on to become a veterinarian, always remembering how Max had helped her connect with someone who needed a friend. But the most important lesson they all learned was simple. Every person matters, and sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change someone's entire world. The town had ignored a homeless boy, but one girl and her dog refused to look away, and that made all the difference.